Hi, everyone, and welcome to Connect to Create. I'm Kathy Ondas with Simply Cards by Kathy, and today is Thursday, April 6th, 2023. I am anxious to show you the black magic technique that you can use with your rubber stamping when making cards or in your paper crafting. Now, if you're new to Connect to Create, it is a collaboration between myself and a good friend and another Stampin' Up! Demonstrator, Pat Fairless from Fairless Stamp and Flair. And each week we alternate to bring you a new technique that you can use in your paper crafting and card making. So, if you're new to us, sit back, relax, learn this new technique, and then experiment it with it in your paper crafting. So, I am going to flip this camera down and we're going to get started. So, I've brought you in pretty close because I want you to be able to see well what I'm doing. The black magic technique uses craft white ink, and I'm using the Stampin' Up! Whisper White on a piece of black cardstock. Now, it doesn't have to be black. It can be another dark color like navy or maybe our gray. But you want it to, the basic or the Whisper White ink to show up on the dark cardstock. Now, when you buy your craft ink, your Whisper White, it's going to come with the stamp pad and it isn't going to be inked. It's also going to come with a re-inker, and the Whisper White ink is a craft ink, and if you're not familiar with it, it's very thick and it can be a little bit difficult to squeeze out. I often, before I do that, will stick it in my glue holder and just have it upside down for that to be able to move down towards the tip. And then if you're new, you're just going to work your ink back and forth and then take a spoon. I keep plastic spoons at my desk for re-inking my pads, and just work it into your pad. And this is the same for all of your re-inking all of your pads. And I'm just going to work it in because I want it to be really moist. I want to get a nice crisp white image. And this has been re-inked several times over the last couple days. So that looks pretty good. Now, along with the dark cardstock and your craft white ink, you need a stamp set that has a solid shape. So I am using Sending Smiles to demonstrate for you today. But when I'm done, and hang with me through to the end, I'm going to show you 3 cards. One with Sending Smiles, and then 2 others at the end. So with this, I have pulled the stems and I've pulled a couple of the flowers. And I'm not going to do an entire card front, but I'm going to stamp enough that show you exactly how to do this. So let's start with this because then I want to set it aside to dry a little bit. Now, when I ink this up, I am using a photopolymer stamp. And I want to be able to make sure I'm getting good coverage. Now, since it is photopolymer, I'm going to bring in my piercing mat, and I'm just going to go ahead and stamp down good. And I am going to press on it and hold it there for a minute because I want that white ink to kind of saturate or adhere well to that dark cardstock. And I'm pick it up. And now let's go ahead and we're going to ink up our flower. Now this one is smaller, so I'm just going to go ahead and get it covered. And you can see it's pretty well covered there. And I'm going to go ahead and stamp. And then let's do the center. That looks pretty good. So now you want this to dry. We are going to color this image, and let's move this out of the way, using our Stampin' Up! Watercolor pencils. Now you aren't going to wet them, and you aren't going to add water to them. But our watercolor pencils are great for coloring dry too. If you don't have the watercolor pencils, and say you have regular colored pencils, or you have pastel chalk pencils, you can use those. Use whatever you have. Now, if you're impatient and you're kind of you need instant gratification, you can go ahead and heat this up using your heat gun on the number 1 setting, which is low. And I apologize for the noise, but you're just going to get it a light touch of heat so that it's dry and it won't smear. And you can check that just by touching it, and you can see that it's dry. Now I'm going to pull in my pencils, and I have all my Stampin' Up! Pencils here in a case, and I've pulled out, let me show you what I've pulled out. I am going to be using Melon Mambo, Flirty Flamingo. I'm going to use, right now, Rich Razzleberry, because it's not quite retired yet. I'm using Old Olive and Granny Apple Green for the leaves, and I'm going to use Daffodil Delight for the center. The whole idea of doing or working with this black magic technique is to color, starting with your darkest color. I like to shade in the center and work your way out and add your colors. So let's go ahead. So I'm going to start with my Rich Razzleberry, and I'm just going to go ahead in here and I'm going to add some dark. This is such a pretty technique. And you can see I'm adding my dark in the center. Now I'm going to come in with my Melon Mambo, and I'm going to actually start where I finished off with the Rich Razzleberry. I want to add over that because I want my colors to blend. I want them to blend together so that there's no definitive line as to where they start and where they stop. And I'm even going to carry it up a little bit, just kind of do whatever feels good. Now this is a Flirty Flamingo, so it's going to come out fairly light. I'm starting back where I was with the Melon Mambo, and I'm working towards the edge to just get a nice soft color towards the end of my petals. And let's go ahead. I'm going to finish this flower up, so hang with me so you can see the finished product. And I'm just going to go ahead and add this in. I know Pat and I are hoping you're enjoying the technique classes each Thursday, because we certainly do enjoy bringing them to you. They're so much fun. And we're going to go back to Melon Mambo, and again, going to start onto my Rich Razzleberry and carry it through. I love the way those colors blend. Now, when we're all done here, I am going to show you a card that I did the same technique using pastel chalk pencils. And obviously they aren't Stampin' Up, but I wanted to try it with a variety of mediums, and that was another one I have. I love my Stampin' Up! Watercolor pencils, and I find they color well, even dry. But I also have some regular colored pencils that I use, and then I have some pastel chalks. We're going to go ahead and fill this in. Okay, now let's do our green. So I'm going to start off with my darker color, which is my Old Olive. And I'm just going to follow this down. And I'm going to add some green. Again, working from the back. And then I'm going to take my Granny Apple Green and I'm going to come in and shade a lighter color. I just want that variation. I want it to look as natural as possible, and leaves aren't all, not necessarily all the same color. And then I'm pressing a little harder here. And then as I move towards the end, I really do lighten up on the pressure so that I have a lighter touch. And you can go back in with your Old Olive if you want to add some more shading. And you can go ahead and go on finishing like that. So let's do this one. Let's finish this up. And hopefully you'll be able to see the variation in color here. Now I'm just going in around the leaves. And I'm going to pick this up and bring it close in for you to see. Isn't that pretty? And that is with our Stampin' Up! Watercolor pencils. Now you don't want to add water to this because for one, we're not using a watercolor paper. So water is most likely going to macerate your image, and also it may move your craft white ink or disturb that. So just coloring is great, is good enough. Now to add a little bit of a twist to this black magic, I have a gel pen. It is a white gel, and you go in and you want to make sure it's moist or wet, and you add a dot to the tips of your petals or the tips of your leaves, or you can add it to the side of the leaves, almost like a toll painting. It just adds a little bit of depth and interest. There I go, that's better, to your image. And I'm just going around to the tips of each of the petals on my flower and adding a dot. Now you can go ahead and do it along the leaves. You might want to, and I'm just going to show you some different ways. You can go right along the leaf like a toll painting. You can go just the tips of the leaves if you'd want to. And there you go. So this is Black Magic stamping technique. Isn't that pretty? So let me bring in the cards that I did to show you. So the first card that I did using the Sending Smiles, I did in the blues, and these are all from Stampin' Up! Watercolor pencils. And with this, I used Pacific Point, and I believe it was Balmy Blue was the other one that's in the set, with Daffodil Delight. And I stayed with the same greens, Old Olive and Granny Apple Green. But isn't that pretty? I just love the way it colors. Now, for my second card, I used Color and Contour. And this is a two-step stamp. So what I did is I stamped my base image, I colored it, then I re-stamped with craft white, and finished off adding a little bit more color. You can do that. And here is the card that I did with the Color and Contour. With this, I used the same pinks that I did in the one that I showed you. And I used garden green with, I believe it was Old Olive. But isn't that pretty? Now this, I added a little bit of our Winkostella to the flower, and I don't know if you can see it, but it gave it a little bit of glitter. So there's our second card. And this was also with our Stampin' Up! Watercolors. Now this card, I used one of the celebration stamps, even though it's no longer available. I used Beautifully Happy because I wanted another stamp that had a solid image, and it was 2 steps. So I stamped my solid, the outline, and then I stamped the centers, and I just colored the whole image white, and then I filled it in. Now with this, I used pastel chalk pencils, and hopefully you can see it. I used purples and some of the greens, and just a little bit different color um, or texture, not quite as bright as with our Stampin' Up! Pencils. So let me bring you back to me for a minute. So lots of different ways you can do this technique, whether you have watercolor pencils, regular colored pencils, or even the chalk pencils. Try some different things that you have and see how you like it. Try using Night of Navy if you don't like the black. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please give us a thumbs up. It helps both of us grow our channels. And feel free to share our video with your friends. It also helps us to grow our channels. So I hope you have a great week. I hope you do some playing with Black Magic. And Pat will be back with you next week. I'm not sure what she's doing, but whatever she does, it's always super. So have a good weekend, everybody. Stay safe, and we'll see you next week.